Shabbat Shalom, everybody. This is Rabbi Stephen, Rav Shmuel, with this week's 10-minute Torah. Yes, a little early. Well, uh, Torah really is kind of timeless. A few years ago, when I was still a little new at this, I actually did the wrong Torah portion during a Saturday morning service, during a Shabbat Shachri. And, of course, I was a little upset and I was concerned. So I tried to research what you do if you do the quote unquote wrong Torah portion. And the answer is there was nothing there. I didn't find anything. I've since looked in the Art Scroll. I've looked at the Shulchan Aruch. I've been through a big part of the Talmud. Nothing. And the reason is because the Torah, the procession of the Torah throughout the year, reading the Torah is really kind of an artificial mechanism. It really is. Devised, I believe, by Maimonides in the Middle Ages as a way for people to always continue studying it. So what happens if you do the wrong portion, the wrong aliyah? At least you're studying Torah, and that's the important thing. So, Vayeshev. Oh, now we start to get into a little bit more drama, if you will. And things are really starting to take hold. So we've had Genesis. We're going through Genesis. We're coming to the final portions. It's about a month or so away. It's before we get into Exodus and we start hearing about Moses. But for now, we've had Adam and Eve. We've had Noah. We've had Abraham, who was the first to really recognize the idea of monotheism as something that's part of the universe. We've had he and Sarah, and Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob, Rachel, and Leah. And now we've had Abraham and Sarah giving birth to Isaac, Isaac and Rebekah giving birth to Jacob, Jacob, Leah, and Rachel, along with their handmaids, Zilpah and Bilhah. Now we have 12 sons, and of course a daughter, Dinah. So we are starting to expand as a people. And Jacob now has his family, and they're doing very well. They're thriving. The sons are off, maybe a half a day's journey, minding the flocks. And Rachel has died. So now Jacob has Joseph. Joseph is Jacob's favorite son, and a reminder of the love he lost in Rachel. So Jacob is favoring Joseph. Now, one of the topics that comes up in our conversation is we see these things going on in Genesis. We see, for example, Jacob marrying two sisters, Leah and Rachel. We see Jacob favoring his son Joseph, who is far from the firstborn. Yes, he is the firstborn of his favorite wife, which was Rachel. And we are going to come, when we get to Leviticus and we start really getting into a lot of the commandments, we're going to see commandments that prohibit this type of behavior, about marrying two sisters together, about having a favorite son, and that the firstborn of the quote unquote hated wife is really your firstborn, and that's it. And that's the way it is. So, in a sense, all of these people are now setting the stage in terms of righteousness and morality for what's to come after this, which is this religion we've called Judaism. Somebody asked me today about, Judaism as a religion. I said, I don't see it as a religion. I don't. I just see it as who and what I am, a part of myself. It's a spiritual path. It's, just a way of life. It's all of those things. So, and this is why, because it tells you how to live. And the story that we hear, that Jacob is favoring Joseph, really is very much a didactic. It's very much a moral story that he tells Joseph, go see how your brothers are faring. So Joseph goes off to see how they're faring, and he comes and they look at him, they see him from afar coming in, and lo and behold, here he is wearing a multicolored robe, the kind that chieftains back then wore. This is compounded by the fact that Joseph is a little bit of a visionary. He's having dreams that he has sheaves of wheat, that their sheaves of wheat bow down to his. The sun, the moon, and the star, and the 12 stars. Guess who they are? Bow down to him. So here comes this little 17-year-old that gets to stay home with daddy and study Torah. And of course, they want to do away with it. They're jealous. They want to do away with it. And you've got actually really 10 brothers, because the 11th brother is Benjamin. He's still an infant. And you've got the other brothers who are the sons, 6 sons of Rachel. And you got 2 sets of 2 sons from the handmaids. And there's kind of a hint that those 4 guys, Dan, Asher, Gad, and Naphtali, are not really treated by the other 6. It's kind of like they're seen a little bit lower in their eyes. But the point is, they all are united in the fact that they don't like Joseph very much, because he's a snot nose. He's the baby brother that just is the pain in the neck. So they want to kill him. And Reuben is trying to intervene. It is actually Judah that says, let's just sell him into slavery. Let's just get rid of him. That way our father, is going to be mourning. He's going to blame us. Let's just get rid of him. And they drop him into this big cistern that's used to, hold water. And they're munching on their lunch. They're eating lunch. He's down there starving, no water. His only company are scorpions and snakes. And they're at a distance, and they go because they don't want to hear him scream, and they want to enjoy their lunch in peace. Meanwhile, and they're thinking, okay, you know what? There's a bunch of Midianites. Let's sell them off to them. In the meantime, and the Torah's kind of unclear. Is it Midianites? Is it Ishmaelites? Somebody sees him, takes him out. The brothers go, and he's gone. They've basically stolen him, take him to Egypt, where they sell him. And they sell him as a slave to this guy Potiphar, who is one of Pharaoh's right-hand men. Now, Pharaoh is the title of the king, the same way Abimelech in Gerar, which was in Philistia, was the title of the king. Abimelech, father king. Pharaoh, I believe I read in the Sansino Chumash that's son of Ra, which was their sun god, which was their main god. And you can understand that if you're a pagan people and you live back then and you don't really know very much. You just know that when this big ball of fire is in the sky, everything's great and it's nice and warm and your crops grow. And, so yes, they worship it. So he's in the court of Potiphar. Meanwhile, the brothers are, kind of freaking out. What are they going to do? And they're thinking, oh my gosh, our father Jacob is going to blame us. So let's kill a goat. Let's take its blood, smear it on the robe, and we can tell our father that, gosh, we didn't see him, but we found this robe, or somebody found the robe, gave it to us, and said, the guy who belonged to this, because he's been torn apart by beasts. Okay, so that kind of settles that. So now here's Joseph as the main servant of Potiphar. And Joseph, despite all his failings, was actually pretty blessed. And Potiphar seems to prosper and thrive. And Potiphar kind of puts 2 and 2 together and thinks, hey, this guy's good news. I'm going to keep him around. In fact, I'm going to make him my chief of staff. And, back then it wasn't that Potiphar had a wife and a daughter and, they lived happily ever after in this little cottage. He was a pretty big, powerful man. He had a whole thing going on in his house. He had servants, that prepared, I guess, state dinners that we would think of. Had a wife that was a little pampered, if you will. But Potiphar, being such an important man, he was usually out in the day taking care of affairs of state. So he leaves Joseph, and Potiphar's wife has nothing better than to do than to see this hot young 18-year-old walking around the house, looking pretty good, and she wants him. So she goes after him. He resists. And the midrash, remember, is the folklore that comes up that kind of fills in some blanks. And Joseph, wondering whether he's going to give in or just knowing that he's got this allegiance to this guy, he's got some moral character, happens to see his father's face, remembers the morality, so of course he just kind of brushes her off and says, well, I work for your husband, and it would be proper. And her, being an Egyptian, being a pagan, didn't really care. She knew what she wanted and she wanted it. And that was part of the problem with the pagans and idol worshippers at that time. They gave in to their bodily urges. And Judaism, what we now know as Judaism, kind of arose as a way to control, not to stifle. For every bodily urge that we have, there is a legitimate way. Remember this, there is a legitimate way to curb our urges. So we know that God created us in God's own image. And if God gave us, if we are born with these urges, then they are natural, but has to be done in moderation. Joseph resists, he's thrown in prison. He's not killed because Potiphar kind of knows what his wife's up to. And Joseph interprets some dreams, and that's kind of where it leaves off. So that's this week's portion. Remember, we have a Hanukkah party coming up December 5th. Sisterhood has decided that you're either vaccinated or you have a negative COVID test within the last 72 hours to attend the party. So please do one or the other. I know it's a little too late to get vaccinated if you haven't. So please do what you got to do. Come on in. We want to see you. We're going to have Ontario Police, the PD there, and we're going to be honoring them. Shabbat Shalom.